Have you ever wondered how an ordinary young man, not born into wealth or politics, could rise to lead an entire nation before even turning 35? This isn't a movie script. This isn't fiction. This is the real-life journey of Ibrahim Traoré, the young soldier from a small town who became the president of Burkina Faso. At a time when many people in their 30s are still figuring out life, Traoré was already carrying the weight of millions on his shoulders. His story isn't just about politics, it's about courage, resilience, and what happens when one person decides to stand up for their people. And today, I want to take you on that journey. Together, we'll explore who Ibrahim Traoré really is, where he came from, and why his rise has captured the attention of the entire world. If you're watching from the US, the UK, or anywhere in the world, I want you to imagine this. What if one day, someone your age, someone from your hometown, suddenly became president? That's how sudden, how unexpected, and how fascinating Ibrahim Traoré's rise truly is. But to understand the man, we have to first understand the country he leads. Burkina Faso, a landlocked country in West Africa home to around 22 million people. It's a nation full of vibrant culture, rich traditions, and incredible resilience. But it's also a nation that has struggled poverty, insecurity, political instability, and foreign interference have weighed heavily on its people for decades. Now imagine growing up in that environment, watching your people suffer, watching leaders come and go, but nothing really change. This was the world Ibrahim Traoré was born into. And from that world, a fighter would emerge. Early life and humble beginnings. Ibrahim Traoré was born in 1988 in Bondoukoui, a small town in western Burkina Faso. He wasn't born into privilege. His family lived modestly, like most families around them. As a child, he wasn't the loudest in the room, but those who knew him say he was focused, disciplined, and unusually mature for his age. Education mattered to him. He pushed himself through school, eventually making it to the University of Ouagadougou to study geology. Yes, geology. At first, it looked like he would spend his life studying rocks and earth formations. But life had a different plan, because beneath the quiet student was a young man with a burning sense of duty to his country. And that duty would soon lead him to the military. The soldier's journey. Why the military? For Traoré, joining the army wasn't about power, it was about protection. His country was facing growing threats, especially from extremist groups spreading across West Africa. And as insecurity worsened, someone had to step forward. In the army, he built a reputation, not for being flashy, not for chasing titles, but for his calm under pressure. He led from the front. He earned respect, not by demanding it, but by showing up again and again for his fellow soldiers and for his people. He wasn't looking for the spotlight, but sometimes history has other ideas. And in 2022, Ibrahim Traoré's life and his country's destiny would change forever. A 3-4-year-old captain, suddenly thrust into the presidency. How did it happen? What drove him to step into power? And why did his rise send shockwaves far beyond Africa? The turning point, 2022 coup. By 2022, Burkina Faso was in crisis. The country was drowning in insecurity. Attacks from armed groups were leaving villages devastated, families displaced, and ordinary citizens living in fear. People were losing hope. They felt abandoned not only by the international community, but even by their own leaders. Soldiers on the ground, the very people fighting to defend the nation, often lacked the equipment, the support, and the leadership they needed. And in that moment of despair, a decision was made. On the 30th of September, 2022, Captain Ibrahim Traoré and his fellow soldiers launched a coup that shook the nation. It wasn't a coup for personal greed or luxury. Traoré stood before the nation and spoke plainly. Burkina Faso needed change. The people deserved protection. And the country deserved leaders who put their nation first. Number 5. Picture the moment. A 3-4-year-old captain, standing in front of microphones, declaring himself the new leader of Burkina Faso. For many, it was shocking. For others, it was a breath of fresh air. Here was a young man, not a career politician, not a puppet of foreign powers, but a soldier who had been in the trenches, a man who understood what the people were going through. In his first statements, he made one thing clear. This was not about personal ambition. This was about saving a nation from collapse. He promised to restore security, reform the military, and bring back hope to the people who had almost given up. The world's reaction. The reaction was immediate and divided. International organizations and foreign governments expressed concern, even condemnation. Why? Because coups, by nature, challenge the established order. But among the people of Burkina Faso, something different was happening. Crowds took to the streets, not in protest, but in support. Young people waved flags, chanted his name, and celebrated as if a heavy weight had been lifted. For them, Ibrahim Traoré wasn't just another leader. He was one of their own, a young man who looked like them, spoke like them, and had lived their struggles. In a world where leaders often feel distant, Traoré felt close, real, relatable, human. From the very beginning, his message was clear. Burkina Faso must stand on its own 2 feet. He questioned the effectiveness of international military partnerships that had failed to stop the violence. He called for unity among Africans, saying that the continent must no longer rely on outside powers to solve its problems. This message struck a chord not just in Burkina Faso, but across Africa. Suddenly, people in other nations were looking at Traoré and saying, if he can stand up to the world at 34, why can't we? It was more than politics, it was a mindset shift. A spark of resilience, and a reminder that leadership is not about age, but about courage. But here's the question. How did Traoré turn words into action? What policies did he push forward? How did he deal with enemies inside and outside the country? And what vision does he truly hold for Burkina Faso's future? Strengthening security, the first priority. When Ibrahim Traoré took power, his first priority was crystal clear: security. Burkina Faso had been bleeding for years under the weight of terrorist attacks, leaving thousands displaced and entire regions cut off from the rest of the country. He knew that without safety, there could be no progress. So he focused on strengthening the military not just with weapons, but with morale. He visited the front lines, stood side by side with soldiers, and reminded them, "This is our land. We must defend it ourselves." Under his leadership, local defense groups were mobilized, and citizens were encouraged to take part in securing their own communities. This was not just about building an army, it was about building unity, a shared sense of responsibility. For many Burkinabe people, it was the first time in years they felt their leader was truly fighting alongside them, not watching from a distance. Challenging foreign influence. But Traoré's leadership wasn't only about fighting battles at home, it was also about questioning the role of foreign powers in his country. For decades, Burkina Faso, like many African nations, had hosted international military forces, and yet, the violence continued. People began asking, if these foreign troops are here to help, why does the situation keep getting worse? Traoré took a bold step. He demanded accountability. He pushed back against partnerships that he felt were one-sided, where foreign powers gained influence while Burkinabe people paid the price. His message to the world was simple: Burkina Faso will decide its own future. We will work with those who respect our sovereignty, but we will never be controlled. This stance made headlines worldwide. Some praised him as a symbol of African independence. Others criticized him, saying his policies could isolate the country. But to ordinary people back home, Traoré's words were like a breath of fresh air. Finally, a leader was putting Burkina Faso first. Of course, leadership is not just about fighting enemies, it's about building a future worth living for. And Traoré understood this. He spoke often about youth, the lifeblood of Burkina Faso. With more than 60% of the population under the age of 25, he knew that empowering young people was the only way forward. His vision emphasized education, agriculture, and self-reliance. He encouraged Burkinabe farmers to take pride in feeding their nation and young innovators to create solutions for African problems. The idea was simple, yet powerful. Burkina Faso should no longer wait for handouts. It should build from within. This message resonated deeply not just in his country, but across Africa, where young people have long felt ignored or underestimated.
Leadership style, a different kind of president. But beyond policies and speeches, what truly makes Ibrahim Traoré stand out is his style of leadership. He isn't the type of president who hides behind walls or lives in luxury. He's been seen wearing simple military fatigues instead of expensive suits. He sits with his people, listens to their struggles, and speaks in a way that feels real, not rehearsed. In many ways, he represents a new generation of leaders. Leaders who don't see power as privilege, but as responsibility. Leaders who understand that true respect is not demanded, but earned, by serving others. Becoming president at 4th of May sound inspiring, but it is also a dangerous road. Traoré's leadership was born out of crisis, and that means not everyone supports him. Inside Burkina Faso, extremist groups remain a constant threat. These are not just ordinary rebels, they are well-armed, well-funded, and determined to destabilize the region. Even with stronger military efforts, the fight is far from over. Every village recaptured, every road made safe, is a reminder of how fragile progress can be. And beyond the insurgents, there are the shadows of politics. Former elites and rival power groups, those who lost influence when Traoré rose, are waiting, watching, and sometimes even plotting for him to fail. For a young leader, the challenge isn't only fighting battles in the desert, it's also fighting distrust in the halls of power, the pressure from the outside world. But the bigger challenge? It comes from outside. When Traoré speaks of sovereignty, of breaking free from foreign control, he isn't just making speeches, he's challenging decades of international influence. And that has made some global powers uneasy. Critics in the West accuse him of isolating Burkina Faso, of pushing away traditional allies. Others claim his partnerships with new allies are risky. Yet, for many Africans, this boldness is exactly why he inspires hope. Imagine being told for decades that your country must rely on outsiders to survive. And then suddenly, here comes a leader saying, "No, we will stand on our own." It's a message that makes some governments uncomfortable, but it makes ordinary people proud. 8. But here's the reality. Time is not on his side. Burkina Faso is still struggling with poverty. Infrastructure remains weak. Schools and hospitals need investment. People want results, and they want them fast. Every decision Traoré makes is under a microscope. If progress is too slow, if mistakes pile up, the same people who cheer for him today could lose faith tomorrow. That is the burden of leadership, especially when you rise to power so young. He doesn't just carry the weight of his nation, he carries the expectations of an entire generation across Africa who see him as proof that change is possible. But here's the bigger picture. Ibrahim Traoré's rise is not just about Burkina Faso. It's about a shift that is happening across Africa. From Mali to Niger, from Guinea to Burkina Faso, young leaders and movements are emerging, calling for independence, sovereignty, and self-reliance.